Welcome, William Egginton.
Thank you, James. Good to be here.
So I don't know if you know about the channel, but it's more, as I was telling you, I was a skeptic my whole life and but always loved philosophy, was my savior, philosophy and literature and art and physics and neuroscience and all of that is, I needed that. I needed some kind of scaffolding as a
Mm,
skeptic, and that was what I completely immersed myself into. But this channel is more about the mystical experience. And
mm.
your book, I think, is such, I would like to make maybe the theme, if you'd like, it's up to you. The theme would be how can Kant, Heisenberg, and Borges help like be a good tool for someone who's searching for meaning and searching for
Mhm.
something deeper. And I think they are so powerful and really humble. Your book is very humbling.
Thank you. Thank you, James. I think it's a great theme. We should definitely, yeah, we should follow through on that. And just so you also know, I don't think this is, one finds each other via kind of strange paths. But I'm currently working with a physicist who has a very kind of powerful mystical strain to his thought. He's the most important physicist in Brazil, Marcelo Gleiser. And I highly, if you haven't read any of his books, I highly recommend
No.
Gleiser. And he and I have we're in the middle of a 3-year grant from the Templeton Foundation in which we're bringing small groups of people who are philosophers, writers, artists, humanists, and scientists together for 4 times a year to to a really magical place that he now lives in a little bit south of Siena in Tuscany. And we spend just 6 days eating together, thinking together, talking together
That's
about one, big, massive question. And we really just focus in on that question from all of these different perspectives. And this is, it's a terrific practice that we've adopted. A lot of people who are into or experts in contemplative practice, I should say, each of the sessions usually involves one or two people who are truly experts in contemplative practices, as well as having these really cutting edge and leading scientists and thinkers coming together, and that really it makes all the difference. It's been quite an experience.
I'm so glad to hear that because I was going to bring up the mysticism later to not blow, just in case you were more like Randy and you would just say no, no, no. So I didn't want to blow the interview. Just
Mm.
like I wanted to tell you the last guest I had, and it's so beautiful to have you follow him, was Douglas Hofstadter.
Oh wow,
And yeah,
wow,
and I'm sure he was an influence on you. Uh, I
right
have
there.
mine across. I
Yeah,
was
right
going
there.
to keep it right next to me, but
You just happen to
yeah,
be right here,
yeah,
so.
yeah. I wanted to put it here, but because I don't have a hard copy of your book in Guatemala,
Okay.
I had Gödel Shabak because I had it before, but your book I found in Guatemala uh,
Right.
on the Kindle. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the way I found it, just so you know, is Hofstadter is a good friend of mine, and but he was such a inspiration. He was like the measuring stick for the young 19-year-old me
Mhm.
who was learning, and I would measure. He was in every department. He was in comparative literature and physics,
Yeah.
psychology and computer science, philosophy. So
Mhm.
I wanted to be a version of that. I tried to go that way, and so his that book and his other writing and his zest for writing and the way he writes and the dialogues kind of ruined me for books. Like I read all the great books, we read. I see the books behind you. We read, and then so recently I said, "Give me." I looked into it might have been ChatGPT or Gemini or Google, and I said, "Give me something with a little flavor of this," but like a Hofstadter and Rigor of Angels, your book
Wow.
came up, and when I read the description, that was that was it. It
Okay.
was
Well,
so beautiful.
Chad isn't all bad then.
No, 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 no. And I want to say before we dive in how beautifully written it is.
Oh,
Like you
wow.
covered it on every way. The content is phenomenal, but then the content could be dry. Yours isn't dry. Yours is really dramatic and fun and
Oh,
like
that's kind to
Hofstadter,
hear. Mm.
So and
Thank
to
you.
have the three and the
Uh,
three, Gödel, Bach and Kant, Heisenberg
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Borges.
what we'll get into a little bit the book. As you wish and as you're, on the basis of your questions, of course. But certainly, Hofstadter's book and the structure of the book and the taking three authors from completely or not just authors, thinkers, magicians, but from three completely
Yes.
right fields and seeing the alchemy that's produced when you bring them together. That was, of course, Hofstadter was really an inspiration for me in that regard as well. Mm.
And I think you said, I could have sworn you said, but I could be wrong. Because just like he said, the book was going to be Gödel and the human brain was originally. I
Right.
thought your book was the opposite of what you had too many figures
I
and then
did.
you narrowed it down to
Yeah, I'd been trying the theme, what I was exploring was going to be there one way or the other, what the ultimate nature of reality is and how human cognition, what is the limitation, the fundamental limitation on human cognition when it comes to dealing with the all that whatever reality is. Um, and then so I knew I wanted to tell this story. The question was how, who are the going to be the who are going to be the vehicles for this story. And at first, I think I came up with, it still had 12 chapters and something before and something after, but my original structure had a different hero of each chapter. And then I really felt that I needed to pull it in. And I pulled it in too far at first, and then it was too tightly right around one person, and then it blew back out again, and then I ended up with those three.
who was the one? Was it Kant?
No, it was Boethius of all things.
Oh, and that's what's
Another
great.
another
All
great man.
those characters they're still there. You have
They're still
Dante
there.
and,
Yeah, yeah.
Einstein. Yeah.
They're absolutely still there, and Boethius absolutely is still there. But I realized, we know relatively little about Boethius's life. It would have just been a lot to, maybe a lot of
Yeah.
on my part, and also jumping forward all the time from the fourth century up to
Right,
quantum
right.
mechanics to sort of deal with relativity. That would be a little bit more of a leap to do that constantly over and over again. So no, that wasn't going to work.
It's so perfect. So how if for the people listening, because that's all I think about is someone who's struggling. I never even think about the happy listener. I always think about the struggling listener who could tune in and actually get something useful from the conversation. And so how can Kant the way okay, Doug did dialogues and you did Kant's antinomies, like you broke the book up into the four. Why would the four, what are the four antinomies and what how can that help someone who has no idea Kant is too hard and they have no clue? They just know he took a walk every day and certain little things
Yeah.
about Kant, but they don't know how it could really help them in their humble them and help them in their search.
Humbling is important, James.
Yeah.
I think listen, I want to take the form of your question very seriously. So how does reading and thinking about the world the way that Kant did help for someone who's maybe struggling at a very personal level? And I think, one of the ways is certainly not all of the ways, but one of the ways to generalize struggles is a question of what are you trying to do? Right? When you're facing the world, are you trying to understand every aspect of it? Are you trying to um, cast yourself in a role where every problem that comes to you, you have a solution for it? I think a lot of the times we are, right? There's a sort of at the heart of anxiety or at the heart of depression, there's this idea that, well, I should be able to do this. Why? Well, because I can conceptualize the problem. I can see what I think to be all the way to the borders of the problem. I can see how big the damn thing is that's bothering me. And if I can see it and I can understand it and I can grasp it with my mind, then why the hell can't I beat it? Why can't I fix this? And maybe that problem is the way that I see myself interacting with the world. Maybe that problem is all these other people and what they think about me. Maybe it's the ambitious plan that I've set up for myself, right? There's all sorts of ways that we can think about what's potentially overwhelming me as a problem. And I think even though Kant doesn't set out to kind of offer us psychology of the soul, I mean, quite frankly, he does at times because Kant literally set out to do pretty much everything. And in that sense, probably isn't the best model because that's probably not a good pathway to follow, is right. Do they know everything. But what Kant was constantly reminding us is this vast gap between what your reason can conceptualize and what you actually can know, what you actually can master, right? So that's why it's called the critical philosophy. The critical in the critical philosophy is about reminding us of the limitations, fundamental limitations, inbuilt limitations of
Yes.
on our ego, on our ability to grasp to the world. So you can think about that in sheer epistemological terms, right? And that is certainly one, that's the basis of it all, right? How I cannot use the tools that are stuck within a human body and brain that is destined to work within the confines of space and time, right? I'm extended in space. I'm going to be limited spatially in every possible way. I'm constantly going to have to synthesize my impressions of the world over space and over time. I can only experience things sequentially. I can't get ahead of myself other than via the imagination. How is a being like that who also then grasps the greatness of the world and the hugeness of the world and the relative insignificance of him or herself vis-a-vis that vastness, right? How are we not going to run into trouble all of the time? Well, Kant says we're going to run into trouble unless we put brakes on that tendency that we have, named a tendency of reason itself that always wants to link everything together, to think that it can step outside of space and time and get a perfect image, see the universe the way that God does, whatever God is, right?
Right.
See causality from beginning to end the way that God does. Uh, um, be able to stand outside of space or time, to delve into the absolute small, the most infinitesimal small connections between things as they happen, and know what that link is. Find that particle of a link, as Kant used the exact same word, Teilchen, that the word that he used for that
You
many
said
years.
particle?
He did Teilchen,
Wow.
yeah, 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 many years before particle physics was invented, right? So Kant said we're going to be constantly trying, and the universe has a nasty trick for us because when we do, we're going to mess everything up, right? We are going
Yes.
to create vicious fantasies that are going to come back and bite us. We're going to produce incomprehensible paradoxes. We are going to fall into fanaticism and ultimately violence on the ethical front, right? Or to go back to the platform of your question, we'll torture ourselves and interiorly, right? And
Yes.
so those that learning that humility, that learning that fundamental intellectual humility, in some ways is the key to everything, also to those of us who are suffering inside.
So perfect. And the title for everyone listening of the book is Rigor of Angels. And I'll try to say what I think it means, but you'll say it better. The rigor is the work, right? I think the work of but not like the chess masters. We have to have the rigor of angels, which is a more humble and delicate or light, like Chesterton said, angels could fly because they what was it? They think of the world lightly. I can't remember. They take themselves lightly.
Maybe.
Metaphor, metaphor, metaphor.
Look, the
But
wonderful. The wonderful thing about a poetic title, and it's not my poetry, as you know, I borrowed it from the incomparable Jorge Luis Borges,
Yes.
um, is is the luscious variability of its meanings and its interpretations, right? A title like that is intended, or a title or a line like that is intended to elicit our interpretive abilities and to draw us into to some kind of a conversation with it. My reading of the line from Borges, and it comes from a sentence, it comes from a passage at the end of what I sometimes call as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, short story ever written, which has kind of an unpronounceable title, or it's pronounceable, people look at it and say, "What's this all about?" Called Tlön Ukbar Orbis Tertius, which is a story uh, 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 about a secret society that invents an entire world. And they invent it kind of from the ground up, every stitch of it, every belief, every religious system, every language. They just sort of invent it through. And it's this mass multi-generational secret society that's been working, behind the scenes to create this idea. And what Borges says in this kind of mystical, haunting epilogue that he writes, which he purposefully post-dates the actual time that he's writing it. So it's a work of science
Right.
fiction, the epilogue, right? He's sort of reflecting from the future, is that the world has been destroyed between now and and when this epilogue is written, and it's been destroyed because the fantasies of the people who created this world have taken over the world itself. And why have they taken over the world itself? Well, reality gives way, and of course it has to give way, Borges writes, because humanity fails over and over again to realize that the rigor that we find in the world, and there what he means by rigor is the fact that it seems to have this scientifically provable connectivity, right? There's like we find these plans in the world, like the laws of physics, or we find DNA is guiding. Is guiding evolution along, or it's a mechanism for how life reproduces itself. We find these great codes as we kind of delve into the world. And he says over and over again, what we always forget is that the codes, the master code that we seek for and then find behind the phenomena of the world are, in fact, a rigor, but they are a rigor not of angels, but of chess masters. And so, what does he mean by that? He means that when we find rigor in the world, it's a rigor of our own making. Right? We are finding science because it's the science that we make. It's the structure that we create in order to explain the world. It's a language, yes, but it's a language that we write for ourselves to find. It's not written there. God didn't write it in this exact language. He didn't write DNA and then we would discover DNA. DNA is our way of understanding, right? The particular models. It's a model that we come up with to explain something that we have discovered, the phenomena that we've discovered. In the exact same way that quantum mechanics is a mathematical model that namely Heisenberg, was the first to do it, and then that team of people working with him have put together to explain the phenomena of the very, very small. Or relativity is the mathematical model that physicists after Einstein have put together to explain the mind-bending physics of the very, very large and the very, very heavy. Right? These are, yes, they're rigorous, but they're rigorous because they speak the language that we put into them.
Yes.
Right? Not because we'd suddenly discovered the language that pre-existed us by millennia, millennia, and eons, because God had written it into the universe.
So, so the mistake we make is we think it's out there, and we don't realize the participation, like the relation where as we measure, like Heisenberg
Right.
showed, we're also creating somehow some kind of, right. I don't know how to word it perfectly, but
We're
yeah, we're
participating in the
participating.
knowledge of the world, right?
Yeah.
They're absolutely and very reliable maps or models that we make of the world, but they are maps and models, right? We are
Yes.
making them, and we're making them. That's why they constantly change.
Yes.
That's why when we get when the tools get better, we've got to change the map. And this is, the great philosopher of science, Thomas Kuhn. He talked about paradigm changes. Why do paradigms change? When you get to a certain point and the previous paradigm is no longer has the power to fully explain the phenomena as they're being filtered through our instruments of knowledge right now. At a certain point, a new paradigm has to replace it. Yeah.
So, and I'll dive into the mystical experience for a minute now, and then we'll go right back to the book. But we'll use the book on, and I'd love to hear your language, your very precise language on what I experienced for just a minute. Um, so, and because you do approach it in the book, I know at the end you say so beautifully that you could know, but but knowing isn't being, and being you have to give up being to know. That's a sacrifice, and once you're being it, you can have to give up the knowing of it in a sense. So in
Right.
my experience, it was my whole life as a materialist. You brought up Kuhn, like it was a materialist paradigm. It was obvious that the world was solid and consciousness came second, later. And so when my brain went into the ground, I go with it. I die with the brain. And it was a whole lifetime of trying to work out the loophole because I didn't like this dying idea. So, there's a whole lifetime of there's something wrong here. There's something permanent, even though I was obsessed with Buddhism and I know it was impermanent. I tried to be courageous, and Randy would really talk about this is it, and forget about Kant, forget about. And one day in meditation, where I just let go of everything, I don't know if you're familiar with the phrase neti neti.
No, tell me.
I think it's a Hindu goes back to like the Ganges River way back, and it means not this, not that, like not that you. So you don't sit and let everything come and go. You just kind of kindly reject whatever comes as
Mm,
you're going deep within. And
mm,
so not this, not this, not this, and the visuals come, whatever, and just no, 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 let it go. And then it felt like dying.
mhm.
Totally, I'm dying, but I knew I didn't take any medicine. I didn't take I call it astonishment medicine or psychedelic. I was
Right.
on maybe a little tiny puff of pot, and I wasn't a pot guy.
Yes, yes.
So the pot was potent, I guess, a little puff, and not this, not this. And suddenly it was like being ripped or torn through, and it was just infinite love.
Yeah, yeah.
So no body, no parents. I said, "Oh my God, my," uh, and I somehow pulled my phone out and wrote my friend who loved your book, by the way, and a philosopher, and I was able to type a few things. It was like a lightsaber. It was like, and I let him know, and he said, "You sound just like Buddha, like Carol. Like, what are you doing?" And it just was that. So I think that's what your book goes right to that. You're going. That's how it could help people because it's almost like what I got from it is it's almost like the VR goggles that of this world. They're built inside, so we don't see them. They're already there.
Right.
That's what Kant's saying. And you're showing how get to know your own equipment, get to know mind and space are inside and not outside, and
And
something like
part
that.
of
Yeah.
part of getting to know that is coming to, and that's what I believe that your experience was an embodied realization of, was coming to realize that there's an inherent limitation. Those goggles,
Yes.
right? Those goggles aren't everything, but every other
Yes.
moment of the day when we're going to, sort of our
There are.
basic operating system is constantly telling us the opposite. They're constantly
Yes.
telling us, no, those goggles, they got it all. The goggles can go the whole way, right? And so what your neti neti experience was doing is testing that essentially. You're just going in phenomenally, right? And at each moment, you're saying, nope, let's go to another impression. Let's go to another. Just
Yes.
get that out of the way. And what you're doing is you're sort of exhausting the paradigm. You're pushing all the way to the point where I mean, if we take I don't know why this just came to me, but the film from the 1990s, with Jim Carrey. The Truman.
Eternal Sunshine. Oh, Truman. Yes, it was exactly that.
Yeah, right. So the Truman Show. Now, of course, what you have to then take out of the picture, and I do this with Kant, with stories and anecdotes with Kant all the time, is in Truman is of course that there is this big reality outside that's been doctored and being played with,
Right.
and the director and everything like that. So we don't have access to that at all. All we know is we get to this point where you've gone on the boat, you come to the end, you come to some sort of a limitation, and it
Yes.
breaks open, right? And
Yes.
breaking open doesn't have a resolution where you're now I'm going to be outside and I'm going to see the real reality. No, what the reality is the breaking open of it, right? And it's just sort of
Yes.
the dissolution of the safety net that you all, which is that belief, that confidence that my goggles, to go back to your metaphor, actually represent the world as it is in and of itself. And it's a scary feeling, but it's also, I think,
It's
it
liberating. Yeah.
liberating is the word that I want. It's a
Yes.
deeply liberating feeling to get to that point.
Yes. And I wanted to say, because your book talks exactly about this, the paradoxes fly out the window. You hit a point where you're beyond paradox, you're beyond, and then there's a point where I don't know how to word this, because this is where it's just ineffable and you can't write about it, even though I wrote 3 books about it. You try your best to point to it, but the word that's why the Buddhists will put a sandal on their head or a shoe or a banana or something, because you can't word it. It's the finger pointing to the moon, or the words of the finger. You're pointing to this, and we always look at, like a pet, we look at the finger rather than, you throw the dog treat and the dog, you say it's over there, it's right there, and
He's
the
looking
dog
at the
looks at
finger.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
made a shrine of the finger, and I put jewels around the finger, and I worshiped the finger. It was all when the guy who told me, he was one of the greatest magicians in the world. He said, Randy's wrong. And it started to shatter me, because
Wow.
Randy was everything, and Darwin and all the scientists were everything. And he said, no, it's not about more books. It's about less books, less knowledge, less. He was trying to point to this pure being, but you have to give up everything. And he said, what are you going to do today? After he told me, and I said, I'm going to go to Borders Books. And he said, what are you going to read? And I said, I'm going to read a book about how concepts aren't it. I'm going to read words. I still needed a map. And then I understood the map is not the territory and the
Mhm.
menu is not the meal. But you have to live that,
Right.
it's words until you live it. But you have to give up, like your book shows, you have to give up. So I see your book as a perfect, like your book, like read Hofstadter, read this, read that, and then read Rigor of Angels, and then you metaphorically jump off the roof.
Oh, wow. Okay.
No,
Metaphorically.
metaphorically, yeah,
Exactly.
metaphorically, meaning
Yeah.
you let go of concepts into, you learn your limits, you learn to take the goggles off, and they're inside. So it's very, like you said, they come back. You even if you take because I tried it with the medicine, and you could take the medicine, and oh my God, you're in this non-dual
Yeah.
space of perfect nothing, perfect everything, and then you realize this is it.
Yeah.
Like your room, this is the whole thing is here. It's not outside of this. And but the next day you wake up and you're back with the
Of
goggles,
course. Right.
but they're a little looser, and
A
then your
little bit
book
looser.
loosens it.
And that's
To
why
me,
it's
your book,
that's why what you're talking about are practices, and practices require iteration. They require learning
yes,
an entirely new way of inhabiting the world. And it's very hard. And I can talk about it, but it's not necessarily something that I'm particularly good at on a day-to-day basis. As anyone else, I get wrapped up into the exact same structures whereby we assume our limited, our set of goggles, themselves encompass the entire world. But it takes reminding. It takes having good conversations, having a meditative,
yes,
contemplative practice that can dislodge that in certain ways. I understand, although it's not something that I've experimented with a great deal, that's one of the reasons why psychedelics have been this. To go back to your original question, about someone who's suffering, and how could, for example, reading Kant. I think one of the reasons that psychedelics have shown so much promise is precisely because of the power that they have of short-circuiting that
Yes.
those certainties that we have about how our map is reality, right? That our maps are reality. Now, our maps are these highly, highly limited, very contingent things that we've been thrown into and grow up with and build. And it's, they're called default networks for a reason. And there's all sorts of ways, but to get any kind of liberation, you have to break the default network. You've got to rupture it in some way, right? And it can be, and that's what mind altering, reality altering experiences are all about. And I'm a big proponent of that you can do it through words. You can do it through talking cure. You can do it through meaning practices. You can do it through prayer, through meditation,
Yes.
but it apparently it also can work quite well with some of these substances as well. If
I'm so glad you said that
if
because
done correctly. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, because I know you're a professor, blink twice if you've taken them, or because I didn't know if you were
Long
in a
time
little
ago.
bit.
Long,
But
long
now,
time ago.
what's
Yeah.
nice about the world though is we're able to talk about it now. Like
Yeah.
even Harvard Divinity School is pro, and I like to call it astonishment medicine because
Yeah.
and that's why this is advanced astonishment. It's not just like a magic trick or something where you go wow, but it's like the top tier, top shelf astonishment, which Kant is writing towards, and
Oh,
all the
yeah.
everyone's working. And I think your whole, I mean, philosophy itself and literature are all. I had a friend who, the same friend that loved your book, a philosopher, and he said when it hit him before he had the experience, he had an epiphany. And in
Mhm.
the epiphany, he saw that philosophy is just moving towards it. Like it's like everything is moving towards this and shouting it, and we just don't hear it sometimes.
That's right.
What
We don't
we
hear it sometimes, or we fall back into this default network that then closes things off, and we get back into our daily lives, and there's a certain comfort to that, even if there's agony as well. There's a comfort in our own daily agony. It's
and then
that
the agony could push us, and I think that's what your book shows. Like even you putting how Borges, what was her name, Nora, his love,
yeah.
uh,
Mhm.
uh, uh, Nora Lang. She, her hurting him
Mhm.
pushed him towards Zeno, into Zeno's arms,
It did.
which Hofstadter embraced and you embraced and I embraced. And it's so beautiful to have Zeno written into the fabric of this consciousness, and you can go to Zeno and learn something from that,
That's
you
right.
know.
It calls Zeno's, he has this beautiful line where he says, "Remember that we've dreamt the world. We always forget that we've dreamt it.
Oh,
We've dreamt it as ubiquitous in space and durable in time, but we've left these little interstices of unreason
that.
behind for us to find up, and we find them in Zeno's paradoxes and in Kant's antinomies.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would call them breadcrumbs. And
Breadcrumbs.
yet
Yeah.
there's plenty of breadcrumbs. And then and I'm sure you know this feeling, as you get more onto, you pick up a few more breadcrumbs, you get
Mhm.
a little more confident and you start to, something happens, and this is going to sound poetic, but I mean it from, your language is so precise and mine is so more like hippie-ish, but I mean it in a philosophical way. Like you start to fall in love with yourself, like the true, because it's the true nature of everything, and you become more bold. And then the breadcrumb, the next time you see it is like a little cupcake. It's a little bigger. It's like a
Indeed.
little piece of cheesecake or tiramisu. And now it's so obvious because the breadcrumb's hidden, but now you see a cake.
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
and you
yeah.
keep moving and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
You've
But
attuned yourself.
then
You've attuned yourself to thinking in a certain way, attuned yourself to
I
paying
love
attention
that.
in a certain way.
Yes.
You're right. Yeah, yeah.
It's all like a frequency, and your book talks about that. It's like I always say it's like a dial. My dad would always, he was a tough dad, like Tony Soprano, but tougher,
Oh God.
and from
Mm.
Brooklyn, New York. But he had a big heart, but he would preset his little radio stations in the car, and we were little kids. So when he would start the car and then go in the house, we would mess with the stations, the presets, and he'd come back in and want his classic little music, from
Oh
the
man,
60s.
I bet he didn't
And
like
he would
that.
get like heavy metal or something, hours there. And so I think nature sort of, I don't know what it is, but you can get there one day, and go, wow, I think I'm onto it. And you got to be humble
Yeah,
because the next day the station gets
yeah,
moved and you're way off.
that's right. Got to be
You
humble.
have to learn.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's something about understanding that one of the fundamental laws is lawlessness. One of the fundamental laws is
that's
contingency.
great.
Yeah, yeah, and it's
Yes,
gonna bowl you over every time, and somehow learning to flow with that and not be so upset by it is, that's again at a personal level one of the take homes, I think. And the other thing that you
yes,
said that came back to me after you said it, which I like, you get to a certain point in this process to go back to your kind of neti practice where the paradoxes go out the window.
yes,
I like that. Why? Because the paradox, right, is what's bothering the certainty of your knowledge, right? That
yes,
it's one of those interstices of unreason. That's why Borges said they're little signs that your picture of the world is wrong. So of course they go out the window because you're throwing your picture of the world out the window, right? You're
yes,
right, and so that's when the paradox starts to disappear. When you realize, oh, because the way that I've been thinking about myself as an individual in the quite etymological sense, undividable being,
yes,
individual being who's kind of following a path through space-time that has its logic and reason and can plan ahead and all of this. That model is really messing me up. That model
yes,
is getting something fundamental about nature and my role in it wrong. And as I'm trying to say in this book all the time, one of the fundamental parts of it that it gets wrong is how um, foundational relationships are, right? They're not things that happen to individuals. Individuals are sort of epiphenomena of something far more fundamental, which is
perfect.
relationality, right? We're
Yes,
all in relationship, not just us, but particles, right? There's no such thing as
everything.
a particle on its own,
Yes.
right? A particle is the result of a relationship. Everything is the result of a relationship.
Even Rumi says all the particles in the world are in love, and
Hmm.
that's why they come together. Like and physics is showing this now. I mean, we're seeing it with the was it 2021, 2022 Nobel Prize winners that showed the proved the Einstein
Entanglement.
spooky.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
improved entanglement, all three of them, exactly. And
yeah,
they've been doing it since the 1980s. Alain Aspec's, I think, was 1982, his first, really demonstration of entanglement. Yeah.
yes. It's
Yeah.
all coming together. The medicines are a little more legal if you take them the right way with the right set and setting. If you take them the way Kant would take them,
Way to
take them.
contemplate it. That's a good way of,
Yeah.
yeah, contemplatively thinking about the practice that
Yes.
that's something you probably know this, but that's something that my own university, so Johns Hopkins, has actually been
Yes, I do know.
yeah, so I'm not personally involved with any of that research, but I have colleagues even in my own department
That's
who are
great.
part of a interdisciplinary working group on altered states of mind that are together with Roland Griffith's team, or he passed on, but uh, members of his team who are now carrying his work forward. David Yadin is, I think, the most visible, or one of the most visible of them. And so one of my colleagues, for example, her focus is on poetry and religious, spiritual, as well as secular mysticism, right? So
Yes.
mystics and visionaries and seers and those who use poetry, for example, to reach those kind of altered experiences. You mentioned it before that philosophy can be thought of as one of those ladders to that,
Yes.
and definitely literature. Mm.
Art, like
Art,
Schopenhauer would say,
music,
art gets
yeah,
us there, but
yeah.
it's so temporary. It goes, you know, it, I remember when I first saw Van Gogh's Starry Night I think it was in the Modern Museum in New York. And I couldn't move for 45 minutes. So I got a front row, like right in front of it. And I watched people from all over the world. You heard so many different languages come and go and how quick they can leave it in a minute. And maybe they just felt they didn't want to stay, but I had to stay. I was staying for everybody. I had to stay right there, and I stayed
But you stayed for everybody. I
quietly.
love that.
It was
Yeah.
so thick, the
Yeah.
paint,
Yeah.
uh,
Oh, yeah.
the swirl, it was just unbelievable. And you sit there and you forget the 45 minute. It felt like 4 minutes or 3 minutes,
This
but
is a
you
great
lose yourself because that subject object hyphen dissolves and you're there, you're somewhere, or you're nowhere.
It's a great example of what you were talking about. You get to a point and the paradoxes go out the window, right? So what's the paradox when you're staring at starry night, right? How can it both be a starry night, which it so exquisitely perfectly is,
Yes.
and be this thick, oily lump of kind of
Yes.
there on the other?
Swirly.
It can't be both. It can't be both. And then you just contemplate and you look and you absorb you
That's
and
it.
that subject object distinction starts to fade, and then you experience how, in fact, that's not a paradox at all. Why is it a paradox?
Yes.
Because I've taught myself to think that way. So I've got a really wonderful surprise, and I'm for my undergraduate students, their first years, I'm teaching them a course called What Makes Us Human.
Wow.
And it's a surprise. All they know is that they're going with me to the Baltimore Museum of Art. And now I'm going to tell
Wow.
you and your listeners a surprise, and hopefully no one will tell them because I want it
It's
to be.
great.
So what we're going to do is we're going to read that week a very famous essay by Martin Heidegger called "The
Wow.
Origin of the Work of Art." And in this essay, "The Origin of the Work of Art," he contemplates in this way another Van Gogh painting, one of the shoes,
I
the
love
farm
the shoes. The old shoes.
old shoes.
Yeah.
We have that at the BMA. We have it hanging on the wall.
Amazing.
So the students are going to be reading this really tough text by Heidegger. That's going to be its own sort of hell. And then
That's
we're going to go
great.
and we'll say, all right, let's get our minds a little bit free. We're going to walk on campus over to the Baltimore Museum of Art, which is on our campus, and then there, I won't even tell them before we get there. We're going to get to that
Real
wall,
deal. Yeah.
the real, the original, with in all of its, plasticity and its thick
Yeah, you
blotchiness,
see that thickness in
thickness
person
of the
and it's
oils, yeah, are going to be right
yeah,
in front of our eyes. And so, but I'm going to
beautiful.
remember what you said about, staying there for everyone else, that this is got to be a practice. You can't just go, let's go see something else now. You really just have to
Yeah, it's
stay.
like climbing a mountain. I only climbed, as a confession. No
Mhm.
one knows this, but I climbed one mountain in my life, like one really big, a nice size, up in the Adirondacks in New York. And I wasn't going to do it, but I was staying in this beautiful place, and it was called Heart Lake, New York. And the lake from the top of the mountain looked like a heart, but you had to
Mhm.
be
You
up
have to
there
be.
to see it. There's the point of view, and everyone pushed me because they were all climbers, and I would just drag a Coleman chair to the lake, but you can't see the heart. You
You
just
can
see
get
the
a start.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But there are bears around. There was a lot of stuff going, and I
A
would
lot of
just
good
shut my
reasons
eyes.
not to
eight
go.
hours a day,
Yeah.
eight
Yeah.
hours a day. I would just shut my eyes at the lake, and then once in a while, and then you're looking at a mountain during Columbus Day weekend, so the leaves are on fire. It's red and yellow, and you're
Hmm.
looking at these mountains, and but everyone was a climber, so they said, "Please do it." And so I said, "To just shut them up, I'll do it." And I climbed the mountain, and then when I got up there, I watched again. I stayed for like 6 hours. It took so long to
Yeah.
get up there. I'm not going right back, but so many people
Exactly.
got up, looked around, and went right back.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a good metaphor for if you want this to stick, like you want your radio dial to stick, again, the practice is to keep it at that
That's
still
right.
point, that beautiful point that, you know.
And, and it's a way not to treat life as checking a box, right? I mean, if you're going
Yes, yeah.
there,
Yes,
and
take a
hey,
picture,
all
self.
that. Oh my
Yeah,
God, James, this taking selfies of everything and pictures. This is one of the
it's
things that drives me
crazy.
absolutely insane. As I'm traveling around the world and being places, literally the last thing I want to do is take out a pic, of
Yes.
one of all things and photograph rather than just sort of absorbing, right? And being there.
I
And
stayed at a place when I was at that place at some point, and I'm sure you've read the book, or saw the movie. Did you read Lost Horizon?
Lost
You
Horizon,
know
no.
it? The movie is there's a movie Lost Horizon by Capra who made It's a
Oh,
Wonderful Life. So
oh,
he made the movie of this book by James Hilton, I think is the name, or
okay.
Hinton or Hilton. And the
Right.
book is about a plane from England with about six passengers crashes in the Himalayan mountains in the
Mm,
snow,
mm,
and they don't know what to do. The pilot dies, and the
mhm.
people get out, and here come the llamas, almost like they knew they were like it was set, like they were ready for them, like hello, and they
Wow.
bring them to this place called Shangri-La. That's where Shangri-La
Yeah.
comes from in the book, and they bring them up to this place that's so beyond their. It's blowing their minds. It's like a trip. It's a journey. It's like wow, they're up there, and one guy just wants to get back to England. Most of them want to get back, but one guy desperately doesn't see the beauty.
Mhm.
Overnight they sleep and they wake up and they feel rejuvenated and better each day, and they feel like they're getting drugged. And
Mhm.
then the main lama finally talks to the main guy, and you realize the main lama is like 1,000 years old. A metaphor again,
Yeah.
like you don't it's so in you talk about the now a lot in the book. It's so in that present moment or the standing now that you can't leave. If he left, he turned to a
Yeah.
skeleton,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so you already die. So you have to stay. It's just saying you have to stay in
In
this
that.
beautiful, and what's beautiful about this whole universe is it's built so perfectly that if you stray, you get kicked in the ass, and it's like a game of hot and cold. It's so simple.
Mhm.
When you're cold, you'll know, and it'll feel cold. It'll feel bad. When you're hot and you're getting closer, you'll feel warmer, and you'll feel you're near Kant's fireplace, and
That's
everything's
exactly
beautiful. And when you get too far out, it'll be scary and it'll prod you. And that's you write a lot about the suffering, and that fit suffering kind of prods you back.
right. Right. Yeah. It's a signpost that that help.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you might say, I can't believe this is really happening right now. And it makes you doubt the reality of this separate world, not the world itself, but seeing it separately rather than seeing it as this one beautiful
Right.
thing that you have to give up. You're not alone.
Yeah.
You know, you're part of this. And that's maybe we can go into Heisenberg.
We can go into Heisenberg. We can go into
That's my
Heisenberg.
segue. That's my
All right.
Johnny Carson segue into
Yeah, no,
Heisenberg.
it's a good one. It's a good one. I mean, Heisenberg, and here's one reason, just to sort of, we'll call it I would call sort of an ontic reason. So just having to do with kind of the surface of being for going into Heisenberg based on what you were just talking about. Because Heisenberg was an outdoorsman. Heisenberg was a great
Oh,
climber. Yeah.
yep.
Very athletic, a skier, and he would do the exact same thing. He, even though his mind, or maybe not just even though, maybe precisely because his mind was constantly working on these deep, thorny problems about the ultimate nature of the universe, he felt he would need to go out into nature in a variety of different ways. When he was younger, it was with his Boy Scout troop, and they would go on these long hikes through the mountains, up to like where you went to get a view of
Yeah.
the lake. In fact, very often he describes sitting over lakes on these mountain passes and having the best conversations, philosophical conversations that will then lead him to these kind of insights, or at least lay the groundwork for later insights. Um, or most famously, and the story's been told, many times, I think very, very well. I tell it, but I think, for example, Labatut tells it much better with a lot more color in his recent what's the English of that book? Um, when we fail to understand the world. Did you know this
Yes.
book? Yeah, yeah.
I I is that the same he wrote yeah, that book I got from your book.
Okay, yeah,
Like
yeah.
your book led me to, if I may, I don't want to let you lose your thought, but it led me to Time of the Magicians, which
Okay.
is Heidegger
Hmm.
and Benjamin, and it led me to that guy,
Labatut. When
and
we
yeah,
cease to understand the world, which is
and he
the
has one more, The Maniac, I
yeah, the
think. Yeah,
Maniac just came out last year, I think. Yeah, and that's about
pretty wild also.
Oh, it is. It is
Yeah.
absolutely. It's about von Neumann. But when we cease to understand the world, retells this moment, and that's the moment that I
Yes.
wanted to get to, and it does so kind of with this visceral intensity that Labatut, that I think no one matches Labatut at. But it's that Heisenberg, famously, as I said, suffering from hay fever, goes to the one place where he's not going to be affected by hay fever, and this is to this island Helgoland out in the North Sea. Which why is it not going to be affected by hay fever? Because there's no trees, there's no
Nothing
plant
there. Yeah.
out in the middle of the
Like the
wind.
desert. Yeah.
North Sea, yeah, and he starts staying up at night and hallucinating, and he gets to that place, and it's
That's
what he
beautiful.
what he describes at the moment of figuring out the intense mathematics that are going to describe whether they're going to turn into matrix mechanics, which is quantum mechanics, which is a whole new, it was, in fact, it wasn't a new, but he had to reinvent it. It was a kind of mathematics, which are, matrices, linear algebra, we call it today, that already existed, but it was very abstruse, and people weren't really using it for anything, or at least certainly nothing that was, real in that sense. And he didn't know matrix mechanics. He did not, I mean, he didn't know linear algebra. He invented it. So from his perspective, it was sort of brand new. Max Born later had to say, wait a minute, this mathematics already
Yeah.
exists. But this kid, this kid had to go and recreate it because he didn't know this already, right? And when he has that moment, and it's such a I mentioned this in the book, it's such a kind of complex mathematics that it actually fails to follow certain of our basic rules for mathematics, like commutation. It doesn't commute. Just like when we say A plus B is the same as B plus A, or A times B is the same as B times A, at least in terms of multiplication, it doesn't commute anymore in matrix mathematics. So what you begin with affects what you're going to come out with, right? What
Yeah.
you choose, what the observer chooses to observe first implicates the observer and then leads to a different result. And he had to come up with a mathematical expression of that. And he did. And he did it in precisely one of these moments, these kind of top of the mountain moments, like you looking at Heart Lake kind of thing,
Yes.
where he stopped and let the universe open up to himself. And that's what he said in his diary that it was like. It was like the surface of the universe was torn
Wow.
open. You could see he got to that end. He got to that end point
Yes.
where things break open, right? And
So beautiful.
to go back to your metaphor, right? Those goggles. Oh, the goggles aren't everything. There's a deeper
Yes.
reality, right? That's beyond. There's one where numbers match up and work in ways that we're
Yes.
limited in seeing when we're stuck in the world of space and time. Yeah.
And the paradoxes are gone.
Right. Paradox of
Everything's
Heisenberg.
gone.
Yeah.
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 What once on this was on medicine.
Mm,
Um, it was like hour six of LSD.
mm,
It taken the right way. I
mm,
mean, in silent darkness with
mhm.
a cat. That's it. No, and dark.
That's kind of
So
cool. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And on hour six, hour four, I don't know if you know what it does, but by hour two, if you just sit alone, like I tell people, I sit alone, like they want to do it in a crowd.
All
No, no,
right.
no, no, not at a concert. When you're alone, so now that's when you're totally,
Mhm.
really. It's like in Plato's cave. You look away from the shadows and you turn to the mechanism of what's causing. You
Exactly.
turn that
Right. You
way,
turn to
which
the
is
light.
really this way. It's yeah, it's right there. And I was given this opportunity still. Everything crumbles away by hour two, hour three, and it's just you can't talk about it. I won't talk about it. But at some point it was, and you'll resonate with this, like a giant typewriter, like a giant QWERTY keyboard.
Wow.
Imagine just that and vast space and a
Yeah.
QWERTY keyboard, and it would click and
Mm.
make architecture, make symphonies, make
Mm.
oh, you want to know how free will works? Here it is. And you can go. And I went, ah, and
Oh, okay.
everything, here's the answer. Here's the ultimate answer. And it was really good for a little while. I don't know how long. And then a weird, dark,
Mm.
horrible feeling came in. And this fits your book. I
Mhm.
always tie it back to your book. A horrible feeling came in that it was like a clock mechanism almost, like it
Mhm.
switched to, it's all like knobs and
Yeah.
cranks and things and how this all works. And you're in the oil, you're in the joints of it, and you're getting it, but it doesn't feel good because you feel like you're there forever. Like
Hmm.
that, you could be here forever. And I said, I don't want to be here. I don't want to know it. I don't want to know it.
Yeah.
And I
Oh.
said, please, I don't care about knowing it anymore. And
Mhm.
it said, it said,
Right.
um, like, of course. And the whole thing was like a fake Mylar backdrop, and it just dropped to
Dropped.
infinite, to what Heisenberg
What were
said
you?
when yeah, it just dropped. But like your wish is you had to give up the knowing, you had
Hmm.
to give up explanation, and your book totally, I got choked up when you wrote that you could say it better than I can about perfect perception and perfect knowing
The
and
same as perfect forgetting.
knowledge and yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
It overlaps with perfect forgetting and perfect oblivion. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And the way you say, I love, maybe you can go into the closer we think that the better microscope and the better the closer we look, we're going to get to it. We're going to get to the noumenal.
Right.
But
No, the best story, and maybe and I don't know what time frame you're on, but I'm going to have to eventually go.
sure,
So I'll start to wrap us up with this if you
sure.
don't. Again, Borges is, who's so poetic about these things, has this parable. He often wrote parables, right? And this one
Yes.
he calls of rigor in science. So it's another place where he uses the word rigor. And I have a recording of him. It takes him 55 seconds in his
Uh,
old wavering voice to read. That's how short this is. One paragraph
wow.
parable. And it's about cartographers, mappers who get sent out by a king to map the king's realm, right? And first they come back with a really big map. It's like the size of a small
Huh.
city realm.
Yep.
King says, "Yeah, it's a good map, but it's not accurate enough." So then they come back with one that's even bigger, right? And it's like the size of maybe a state, like the size of Maryland or something like that. And he says, "This is a really accurate, good map, but I want something more accurate." And then they come back with a map that matches the entire realm, point
Right.
per point. And then Borges says, and the vestiges of that map are still rolling around in the desert of, essentially the desert of the real, right? That's it.
Oh, it's great.
The perfect coincidence of knowledge and what it's supposed to be knowledge of is the destruction of both. Mm,
Yes.
mm.
I like that you said Heisenberg went to these like to get away from the pollen. Was it the pollen?
It was, yeah, yeah,
Something
yeah.
he went, and that's what Thomas Merton, the mystic priest, would say. The wise people go to the desert, whether it's your room or
Mhm,
your
mhm.
garden, wherever you go to be quiet, you go to the desert, and it's empty, and it's empty because that's where that if there's too many people, you can't,
Oh
it's
yeah.
too distracting. You have to go to this silent, quiet place, and that's where God or pure imagination or pure whatever that
From,
is.
from story after story from all the holy books,
Yes.
where do the prophets go? They'll go to the desert, and
Yes.
Jesus went to the desert for 40 days to
40
be tempted,
days,
right? Right. So there's this
the
exact
forests.
time,
Yep.
right? You go and you're being tempted by deprivation. It's sensory deprivation,
Yes.
and then eventually you get a breakthrough, and so
And
that's
you
what.
said he had hallucinate, he went through some hallucinatory
Yeah, yeah.
stuff like Jesus. Yeah.
Right, like Jesus, exactly. And I mean, that's what, if you want to look at that, the appropriate chapters in Labatut's book, that's what he describes so viscerally are these the kind of what his brain is doing to him on the
Yes.
of this extraordinary discovery. That's what I love about. But that's what Labatut, as he said in an email to me once, we share similar obsessions. But that's really where his obsession will always take him is to like, what kind of a experience must you be having to be the person who figured out black holes, for example,
Yes. Yes.
or to be the person who figured out, in Heisenberg's case, quantum mechanics? And so he likes to describe kind of you have to be on the edge of sanity to be able to make a discovery like that.
I love that. My teacher always taught me there's a price you pay for everything,
Hmm.
and no matter what, and it's true. And you have to give up sometimes in order to get. Hofstadter's favorite line in one of my books is because I go at him sometimes, but lovingly, very kindly. But I go at him because he says all these things, but he claims to be a materialist, and I'm like, You can't say that we're a hallucination, hallucinated by a hallucination, and still be a materialist. And he dances right on that edge, but he won't jump.
Mhm.
And so my book, one of the books, I call it The Gospel of Astonishment, tries to push Doug over the edge lovingly, but of course, just kindly and fun because his point of view, it's a price you pay to take that point of view. You pay a price on your point of view. I pay a price on my point of view. You can go, you can make your
That's right.
bed in heaven or make your bed in hell. Whatever, you have a price,
This is a good, I mean, this brings it right back around to, to the rigor of angels. Also, one of the key messages of that would be there is no knowledge without a price, right? Because, and why? Because that would be a knowledge that somehow is perfect transparency of the world, but that's not knowledge
That's
anymore.
yes.
There is, at some point playing around with the different possible titles, I thought about the indelible flaw, right?
It's
Our
good.
perspective on the world has an indelible flaw because without that flaw, it's not there, right? It's where it's, and I went to, E.T.A. Hoffman's story of the man who it's the birthmark, and he tries to perfect his wife by scrubbing the birthmark, this little mark she has on her face off, and he essentially he does, but at the cost
At a
of
cost. Yes.
yeah, exactly. So he
Is
finally
that the same as the stain?
it's
I
yeah.
remember something with a stain. Same one. Okay.
I don't know if it, but
I
the
thought you wrote about a stain
title.
somewhere.
It is. It's a
Yeah.
birthmark on her face, right?
Yeah.
That they
Yeah.
try to get rid of. And in fact, it was one of I think in the final edition of the book that that was not part of the epigraph, but in my
Uh,
original manuscript, I had that in there. So it was a meaningful parable for me as well. Yeah.
and I know you have to go, so maybe to wrap it up, we could just end with Borges, and I'll give my take, and you give the real take. Like what I get from him is he points to these. I was a librarian for 20 years in New York, so
Mhm.
he's all about libraries and books and these infinite like labyrinths and mirrors, and it's almost like a trip you're on. And I like that you wrote, I think it was you who wrote that you don't because people take him like a trickster, like, but
Right.
it's not. He's really helping you
He's a
to get
guide.
to this point. Yeah, he's a guide. Yeah.
I take him as a cautionary. What he's writing is always cautionary tales, and it's cautionary tales about precisely what you and I have been talking about this whole time, right? To go back
Yes.
to the metaphor that I like so much of your, VR goggles, that believing your own VR goggles are in fact reality, as opposed to
Yeah.
recognizing that they're a technology. They're a very, they're going to offer you a specific limited take on the world, and you're never going to have one pair of goggles that's going to show you the world as it actually is. You can switch them
Right.
off to a different pair of goggles, right?
Right.
And but we're always believing that they're giving us unvarnished reality, and that's going to lead us into trouble. And Borges' stories are always about taking that assumption that we have and showing us, letting it break down in front of our eyes, showing us the absurdity that
Yes.
comes when we take it too seriously. Mm.
Wait, and I'll end on that. Like you just said, unvarnished reality is
Mhm.
such a beautiful, that should be a book.
Yeah. Thank you.
Unvarnished reality. So thank you. And are you working on, can I ask a book based on where you're at with this, almost like a non-think tank, more like
Yeah. I'm in
yeah.
the middle of it. I've got about
Oh, great.
300 manuscript pages under my belt. I'm aiming to hand it into to Pantheon in about a year. So
Incredible.
working away at
So
it.
in a weird, wild world where we're heading into with
Mhm.
AI and we don't know what, talk about uncertainty.
Right.
We know we have a book coming. That'll be that'll be something.
Thank you. it's keeping me sane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes the books are for every time I write it, you realize it's really for yourself.
Right.
And then of course it's great if
You hope
people
that it's
can.
also for other people, but you got to write
Yes,
it,
yes.
right?
Because there's
Yeah.
this one.
Exactly.
Thank you, William.
Enjoy. You're not in Antigua. Enjoy.
No,
San
one
Marcos.
day I'll let you know when I go. You were here in Antigua 35 years ago.
Something like 35 years ago. Yeah. It's a long
Amazing.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Enjoy.
you.
Take care, James. Good to meet you.
Take care.